The church teaches us an important lesson with the juxtaposition of yesterday's feast of the conversion of St. Paul and today's celebration of the saints Titus and Timothy. And in yesterday's story, we heard about how Paul's life took a complete 180. How he went from persecuting the church to being an instrument of God's grace. Well, today we hear about Timothy and Titus, two very early bishops of the early church, who were chosen by Paul to partake in this mission, this very same mission. And they, like Paul, had their own baggage, their own shortcomings. And that's one of the unique things about Titus and Timothy that we don't often get to hear about when we hear about saints. What were their struggles? Where did they need to grow? Titus, we hear about, was from a Gentile origin. So for those early converts of Christianity to Christianity from Judaism, this was pretty radical to think that Titus could be a Gentile and yet chosen by God. And Titus, we hear, is well known for his ability to make peace, to mitigate different situations, to be bold and enter into difficult situations in order to bring about God's peace. But that came with the flip side, that sometimes he was a little bit too bold and would lack charity or lack patience, St. Paul tells us. Timothy also was, we hear, was with Paul in those very difficult moments when Paul was imprisoned, and he had this gentleness about him. But Paul says there are also times where Timothy needed to be bold, to speak up, to stand up for what he believed, to have a little more self-control, as we hear in our first reading today. It's interesting to know that saints were real people like you and I, who had their strengths and their weaknesses. But yet God can use their weaknesses for his glory, can continually grow them in his love. So today, as you go about your day, and as you might think of yourself as also an imperfect instrument of God's grace, remember that God can use you and does use you to proclaim his good news today.